Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a look at a company whose name you might not know, but whose products,
Yeah,
well, there's a very good chance you've worn them. We're talking about the brands you see everywhere.
that's right. And we're going deep into the corporate powerhouse behind them. Deckers brands.
Deckers brands. You hear that name and maybe nothing clicks immediately. But if I say UG boots
Or Tia Vandals.
or HOKA running shoes,
Right. Suddenly everyone knows exactly what we're talking about. And our mission for this deep dive is to go beyond, the individual shoe. We're going to look at the corporate strategy, the history, really the decisions that turned a tiny flip-flop business into a multi-billion-dollar giant.
Okay, let's unpack this because
Yeah.
the scale is
Yeah.
it's genuinely astounding. The company is formerly known as Deckers Outdoor Corporation, but they do business as Deckers brands. They're based out of Goleta, California.
And this isn't just some big shoe company. They're a major, major player. Publicly traded on the NYSE. The ticker is DECK for anyone who wants to follow along.
And this is a big deal. They recently became a component of the S&P 500.
That's a point we really need to emphasize. Being added to the S&P 500 isn't just, a nice little award. It's a huge signal to the market. It means you've hit a certain level of scale, of stability. Basically, you're one of the 500 largest, most significant public companies in the U.S.
It's a stamp of approval from Wall Street saying your long-term strategy is working.
Exactly. And while footwear is clearly the engine, their portfolio does span into apparel and accessories, too. They're a global company.
So let's talk about that engine. Let's talk numbers because they're pretty staggering. We have a snapshot from March 31st, 2025. Annual revenue is closing in on, what is it, $5 billion?
It's knocking right on the door. US $4.9 billion. It's a massive, massive revenue stream. And think about what it's built on. Sheepskin boots, chunky running shoes, and sandals.
It's credible. But revenue is one thing. What about profitability? Because you can sell a lot and not make much money.
Well, this is where it gets really remarkable. The efficiency is just off the charts for this industry. You're looking at an operating income of about $1.18 billion.
$1 billion.
And net income comes in at $966 million. So think about that. For anyone who tracks business, that's an operating margin of over 20%.
In the footwear and apparel industry, that's almost unheard of. It's so competitive, so cost sensitive.
It tells you everything. It shows you they have incredible pricing power and really, really efficient operations. They're not just moving boxes. They're selling premium products that people want, and they're doing it very, very well.
You don't get to almost $1 billion in net income by accident. That takes incredibly tight brand management.
Precisely. And to support all that, they have a huge global operation. We're talking 5,500 employees around the world, 179 physical locations, which includes everything from corporate offices to distribution centers to retail stores.
And when you look at that scale today, it's just so hard to imagine where it all began. It makes you really wonder, how did we get here from there?
Yeah, the contrast is stark.
So let's do that. Let's rewind the clock and get into that origin story. Section 1, from California craft fairs to the Goleta headquarters.
Okay, so the year is 1973. The whole thing is started by two guys, Karl F. Lopker and Doug Otto. And the story doesn't begin in some, fancy boardroom.
No.
It starts at craft fairs.
Right.
Literally, Karl Lopker was making handmade flip-flops and just selling them at different markets up and down the West Coast.
That's the ultimate direct-to-consumer model, isn't it? Decades before it became a tech buzzword.
Absolutely. It's local, it's hands-on, you're right there talking to the person buying your product.
I can just picture it. A folding table, a sunny day on a boardwalk, bins full of sandals. It's the complete opposite of an S&P 500 corporation.
It is. And that foundational product, the flip-flop, is actually what gave them their name a couple of years later in 1975.
Right, the naming story. This is a great little piece of trivia.
It is. So Doug Otto is on a business trip in Hawaii, ground zero for flip-flop culture. And he keeps hearing the locals use this slang term for the kind of sandals they were making.
We call them decas.
Decas.
But why? What did that even mean?
It was just a simple descriptive term. The way their sandals were built with these stacked layers of foam or wood, it created this striped look on the side.
Ah, so it looked like a deck of cards or a stack of wooden decking.
Exactly. Just a visual metaphor. And Lopker and Otto, they loved it. It sounded authentic. It was connected to the product's look, so they just adopted it. Deckers.
It's a great story. But a company selling flip-flops at craft fairs doesn't become a Wall Street giant, no matter how good the name is. There had to be a major shift.
There was. And the first real sign of their strategic genius, I think, came in 1985. This is a critical milestone.
This is the Teva deal.
This is the Teva deal. Deckers secures a licensing agreement to produce and distribute Teva sandals. And this is the moment they pivot. They go from being just a manufacturer of their own stuff to being a manager, a scaler of other innovative brands.
It's a huge change in mindset.
Huge. Teva was this revolutionary product in its own little world, and Deckers realized, licensing this thing is a much faster path to growth than trying to invent another hit ourselves.
So that Teva licensing deal really becomes the blueprint for their entire future. It's the model.
It is. It's the first time you see them say, our plan isn't to be Nike. Our plan is to find these very specific, almost weird product categories and just completely dominate them.
And to do that, you need capital. You need a corporate structure.
Which leads directly to 1993. The company goes public on the NASDAQ. They officially rename themselves Deckers Outdoor Corporation, and that IPO gives them this huge injection of cash.
Cash to go out and execute that blueprint on a much bigger scale.
And they don't waste any time. That same year, 1993, they go out and buy a company called Simple Shoes. It's a smaller deal, but it's important.
Why?
Because it's their first test of outright brand ownership. They'd licensed Teva, so they had that experience. Now they were using their new public money to see if they could actually buy and integrate another shoe company into their system.
It's the first taste of being a true portfolio manager.
Exactly. You start with your own product, you learn how to manage someone else's, and then you start buying. But the acquisition that really, truly changed everything, the one that bit the financial empire they have today, that came just 2 years later.
Which brings us to Section 2. Building the portfolio, the strategy of niche acquisitions.
And this section really is all about one word.
UGG.
UGG. The 1995 acquisition of UGG Holdings completely redefined Deckers. It took them from being this, California outdoor sandal company and turned them into a global fashion player.
So what exactly were they buying in 95? What is a UGG boot, fundamentally?
Fundamentally, it's a very distinct thing. It's a sheepskin upper with that super warm, woolly inner lining, and then a tanned outer surface, worn by men and women, mostly for comfort and cold weather.
But the story of how it got popular is so key. It wasn't born on a fashion runway in Paris.
Not even close. Its biggest popularizer, outside of Australia and New Zealand where it originated, was surf culture.
Right. An Australian surfer, Brian Smith, started selling them in the U.S. back in 1979. And the whole purpose was purely functional.
Totally functional. You get out of the freezing Pacific Ocean, you're peeling off your wetsuit, and you just want to stick your feet into something incredibly warm and comfortable. That's it. It was post-surfing gear.
So for almost 25 years, it's this niche, performance-oriented product, and then a single moment changes everything.
The Oprah Effect, 2003.
The Favorite Things segment on the Oprah Winfrey Show. It's hard to overstate how big that was.
It was the flashpoint. It's the moment UGG went from being this regional surfer thing to a global must-have fashion item. The cultural amplification that Oprah provided was immediate, and it was total.
And suddenly, that sheepskin boot wasn't just about function anymore. It was a status symbol. It was a fashion luxury item.
And that transition to fashion luxury is what cemented this core strategic reality for Deckers, which is a heavy, heavy reliance on the UGG brand for revenue.
That's a really important point. UGG is the company's primary moneymaker. And that sounds great, but doesn't it also make them incredibly vulnerable? Fashion is fickle. What happens if sheepskin suddenly goes out of style?
That is the absolute critical tension at the heart of their whole strategy. It's a vulnerability, yes, but UGG's strength has proven to be unbelievably resilient. Let's put this in context. Think back to the 2008 economic downturn.
The Great Recession.
The Great Recession, a time when, discretionary spending just fell off a cliff. People stopped buying non-essential things.
And yet, UGG sales held up.
They did. They actually managed to show earnings and sales growth through that period. And that resilience, that just underscores the power of what they bought. Once UGG crossed over into that necessary luxury category, it created this buffer. It made the brand less dependent on trends and more resistant to big economic shocks.
People were still willing to spend on UGGs even when money was tight.
Exactly. It proved that their strategy of buying into these dedicated, high-value consumer niches really works. It doesn't matter if that niche is surfers or river guides or, people who follow celebrity fashion trends.
But even with that success, they didn't just sit back. They kept tinkering with the portfolio, right? The M&A timeline after UGG is full of them testing things, refining, and sometimes cutting things loose.
It's a really dynamic strategy. They're not just collectors of brands. They're constantly refining the mix. Take 2010, for example. They acquired a company called Mozo Shoes.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Most people aren't, and that's kind of the point. It was a very specific play. Mozo made footwear for the culinary industry. So think chefs, line cooks, people on their feet for 12 hours a day in a kitchen who need durable, non-slip shoes.
So they went from high fashion to kitchen clogs. That's a complete 180.
It was a test. Can we apply our manufacturing and distribution power to a purely utility-focused professional market?
And what was the answer?
The answer was no, or at least not well enough.
Yeah.
By 2015, they had divested Mozo. They sold it off. It likely didn't have the scale or the margins to justify the focus within the Deckers system, which was now really optimized for these huge fashion and technical sports brands.
It shows a certain ruthlessness. If it doesn't fit, it goes.
And we saw that again much more recently in 2024 with Sanuk.
No, that was a big one. They bought Sanuk back in 2011 for, what, $120 million?
$120 million. So this wasn't some small experiment, but they sold it off to a Canadian company called Lowly.
So why let go of a 9-figure asset like that? What was the thinking?
Well, the general analysis is that Sanuk, which is known for its kind of fun bohemian lifestyle shoes, was it was struggling. Growth was stagnant. And there was probably some brand overlap.
It was competing for the same casual customer as some of their other products, maybe.
Exactly, without having the massive margins of UGG or the explosive growth and tech of HOKA. So if a brand isn't doing one of those two things, it starts to look like dead weight. And selling it frees up capital and, just as importantly, management focus for the real growth engines.
Right. It shows they're always assessing the portfolio. But at the same time, they were pruning. They were also doubling down on the things that worked.
Which brings us to the 2015 acquisition of Koolaburra. This was a really clever strategic move.
How so? It seems so similar to UGG. How do you launch that without just stealing your own customers?
That's the art of market segmentation. They positioned Koolaburra directly underneath UGG. It's a similar style, a similar feel, but at a slightly more accessible price point.
So you capture the customer who wants the UGG look, but maybe can't or won't pay the full UGG price.
Exactly. You keep that customer within the Deckers family instead of losing them to a competitor and making a cheap knockoff. And it's incredibly efficient. You already have the sheepskin supply chains, the manufacturing knowledge, the distribution networks. You just leverage that whole system for a complementary brand.
It's a very smart play. But now we have to talk about the brand that is really driving the growth story today, the new powerhouse. And that takes us to section 3, HOKA and the maximalist movement.
HOKA it's a phenomenon. It represents Deckers' big bet on performance, innovation, and athletic growth. Since they bought it, it has just exploded. It's become this crucial high-growth engine that helps offset some of that reliance on UGG.
It really does feel like HOKA just appeared out of nowhere and is now everywhere. You go to an airport, you walk down the street, you go on a hiking trail, and you see those thick-soled shoes constantly.
Yeah.
Where did they come from?
Well, the roots are actually pretty recent, and they're European. HOKA was founded in 2009 in Annecy, France. But by the time Deckers scooped them up in 2013, they had a base over in Richmond, California.
And Deckers bought them right as they were starting to gain some serious momentum.
Yes, momentum based on being completely different from everything else on the market. HOKA didn't try to build a better version of what existed. They just threw out the rulebook.
I'm making these shoes with these just enormous midsoles.
Enormous. And you have to remember the context. At that time, in the early 2010s, the running world was obsessed with minimalism. The whole idea was less is more. Thin soles, feeling the ground, barefoot running.
And HOK came in and did the absolute opposite.
The total opposite. Their shoes had these huge, lightweight, super cushioned stacks of foam. The industry immediately called them maximalist shoes. It was a direct challenge to the biggest trend of the day.
Who was that even for initially?
The first group that really embraced them were ultra runners, people running extreme distances like 50 or 100 miles. They needed the absolute maximum shock absorption and protection for their joints. HOKA provided that.
So Deckers saw this really niche, but very dedicated, following in 2013 and made their move. But the real story is how they scaled it from there.
That's the genius of it. Deckers had to take this shoe, which was seen as this weird thing for extreme athletes, and make it mainstream. They used their massive corporate power, their capital, their global distribution network, the same one that sells UGGs, and pushed HOK everywhere.
And how do they change the perception? How do they convince everyday people to wear these maximalist shoes?
They reframed the cushioning. It wasn't just a performance tool for a 100-mile race anymore. It became a comfort necessity for everyday life. They targeted nurses, teachers, anyone on their feet all day. They made the colors and styles more appealing for lifestyle wear.
But they kept the core technology.
They kept the core tech, but they broadened the audience. And that pivot allowed HOK to jump out of the specialty running store and become a true lifestyle juggernaut. It was a brilliant move to diversify the portfolio away from just fashion.
And it really solidified HOK as a serious athletic brand. They sponsor professional runners, major races.
Oh, absolutely. That maintains the technical credibility. It creates this halo effect for the whole brand, even for the person who's just buying them to walk the dog. It's a masterclass in scaling a niche brand.
Which brings us full circle back to the brand that started it all for them, in a way.
Yeah.
The one that gave them the acquisition model in the first place. Teva. Let's
Yeah.
go to section 4. Teva, the invention driven by necessity and engineering.
Right. If UGG is fashion and HOK is this maximalist tech, Teva is just pure problem-solving utility.
You have maybe the most unique origin story of them all. It wasn't about a trend. It was about solving a real-world problem for a specific job.
Exactly. The founder was a guy named Mark Thatcher. He was a geophysicist, but in 1982, he was working as a rafting guide, spending a lot of time in the Grand Canyon.
And he just noticed this huge gap in the market. There's no good footwear for what he was doing.
None at all. And the existing options failed in completely opposite ways. If you wore sneakers, they got soaked, they got heavy, they took days to dry, and they gave you blisters.
Okay. And the other option?
Flip-flops. They dried fast, but they just slide right off your feet the second you hit a strong current or had to climb over a wet rock. It was a safety issue.
So he needed the security of a shoe with the quick-drying nature of a sandal. And his solution was almost comically simple.
Deceptively simple. He took a basic thong-style sandal and he added one thing, a nylon ankle strap. That's it. That strap held the sandal securely to his foot.
And just like that, the world's first sports sandal was born. He called them amphibious utility sandals.
He did, and in his first year, he sold about 200 pairs. It was a tiny word-of-mouth business just within the river guide community.
And we should mention the name Teva.
Right, a little linguistic note. It comes from the Hebrew word pre, which means nature, and the pronunciation is important. It's T-E-H-V-T-I, not Teva.
So he has this great invention. He sells a couple hundred pairs, but the story gets complicated pretty fast, right? There were some serious challenges.
Oh yeah, it was not a smooth ride. The first problem was a design flaw. The thong-style strap was great in the water, but when people started trying to hike or do other sports in them, they got terrible blisters between their toes.
So it wasn't quite ready for a broader audience.
Not yet. But then, in 1984, something weird happened. Demand just exploded. Not because it was a perfect sports product, but because young people just thought it looked cool. It became this unexpected fashion item.
And that sudden popularity brought all the legal issues to the surface.
It did. The original shoemaker he was working with, a company called California Pacific, basically tried to claim ownership of the whole thing. They said the Teva name and the patent belonged to them, that Thatcher was just an employee.
So he had to sue them to keep control of his own invention.
He had to sue them, and he won in 1985. It was a huge victory. He severed all ties, set up the Teva company on his own in Flagstaff, Arizona, and now he had full control.
And that's when Deckers comes into the picture.
That's when they pounce. Late 1985, Thatcher makes that exclusive licensing deal with Deckers to manufacture and distribute Tevas, and this partnership is what really perfects the product.
This is where they solve that blister problem with the universal strapping system.
Exactly. Deckers' manufacturing power and capital, combined with Thatcher's idea, created the Teva we know today, and that strapping system is a piece of engineering genius.
So break that down for us. What makes it work so well?
Okay, so there are three key parts. First, the heel strap. It goes all the way around your ankle. That's the piece that stops the sandal from just sliding off your foot in a river.
The security part.
The main security part. Then you have the side straps. They're all about structural integrity. If you step on an uneven rock, they stop the whole sandal from twisting or stretching, which prevents injuries.
And it's all held together by those little triangles.
Those little triangular rings are the key. All the straps connect there, and it distributes the tension perfectly across your whole foot. It holds you in securely without creating those painful pressure points that cause the original
It's
blisters.
an incredible design.
Yeah.
But they didn't stop at the straps, right? The sole was just as important.
Oh, yeah. The sole is a two-layer system. The inner sole, the footbed, is softer. It's designed for comfort. It often has arch support. It's for the foot.
And the outer sole.
That's all about performance. It's a much harder rubber compound, specifically formulated for incredible grip on wet, slippery surfaces. That's them staying true to the original rafting guide problem.
And they added one more detail, the microband zinc technology. Why was that important?
That's Decker's thinking ahead about the user experience. You have a sandal that's going to be wet all the time. It's going to get smelly. The microband zinc is an antimicrobial treatment that just reduces odor and kills bacteria. It's a small detail that makes a huge difference on a multi-day trip.
So Deckers licenses the brand in '85, they help perfect the engineering, and then finally they complete the acquisition.
November 25, 2002. Deckers officially acquires all the worldwide patents, trademarks, everything from Mark Thatcher. And at that point, Teva is fully theirs. It's the second cornerstone of the empire, right alongside UGG.
Which brings us to our synthesis. We've looked at three completely different brands. UGG, Teva, HOKA. Different origins, different products, different customers.
And that's the whole point. That's the overarching strategy of Deckers. They did not succeed by trying to be one giant brand for everyone. Their entire model is based on acquiring and then supercharging these powerful, distinct, high-margin niche brands.
Just think about the ground they cover. They have the luxury fashion consumer with UGG. They have the technical outdoor and river user with Teva. And they have the massive running and athleisure market with HOK.
And they were brilliant at leveraging key moments. They rode the Oprah wave with UGG. They invested in the technical innovation of Teva's strapping system and HOK's maximalist cushioning. And that's how they built this global presence, 179 locations, and maintained this incredibly strong financial position even through recessions.
It really is a testament to smart, targeted acquisitions. They find these gems, and then they use their corporate muscle, their capital, their logistics, to scale them in a way the original founders never could have.
And it's not a static process. We can't forget that. The fact that they sold Emzo and, more importantly, sold Sanuk, for which they paid $120 million, it shows they're constantly evaluating, they are pruning, they are optimizing.
If a brand isn't high margin or high growth, it's on the chopping block.
No matter what they paid for it, they're willing to cut their losses and redeploy that focus and capital.
Which leads us to our final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Where does this footwear titan go from here? We know UGG is the cash cow, the luxury foundation. We know HOKA is the high-growth engine, the future of performance.
So the central question is about balance. How do they continue to manage the risk of relying so much on UGG's fashion cycles while pouring fuel on the fire of HOK's growth? What's the next move? Do they buy another technical performance brand to further balance the portfolio?
Or do they try to replicate the UG Kookaburra model in another fashion category? Will they find the next big thing, the next niche to dominate? The clearest signal of their future strategy will be their next acquisition. Will be something to challenge HOKA or something to complement Teva or something else entirely. Keep an eye on those deals because that's where they'll tell us where the Deckers brand's empire is headed next.